Hi friends, it's Crystal from Homemaking on the Homestead, and today in this video we're going to make some cinnamon rolls and a loaf of bread, all from the same recipe. This recipe is an oat dinner roll recipe. I've made it for years and years. My family just loved it. You can use it for dinner rolls if you'd like as well, but today's video is all about cinnamon rolls, and boy did they turn out good. I would have some to show you right now, except I made them a few days ago, gave away most of them to my daughter and her family, and they loved them, and my husband and I enjoyed the rest of them. So in any case, this recipe uses oats, obviously, and you can use quick cooking or regular oats. I've done it both ways. It doesn't seem to matter. It uses half white flour and half whole wheat flour. If you don't have whole wheat flour, you can just use all white flour. That would work too. I think you're really going to like this recipe. So let's get cooking. To begin with, you're going to take 2 1/3 cups of water and bring that to a boil. And after it comes to a boil, you're going to add your butter and your oats. And I kind of stir that around a little bit, and then I take it off the burner and set it aside to cool down. While that's cooling down, I get my flour. I am using whole wheat flour, hard white wheat, and white flour in this. I also just put this into a bowl so that I can kind of stir it and help the temperature come down. I wait until it comes down to somewhere between 100 and 110. At that point, it's time to add the yeast and the brown sugar, a little bit of salt, and I just kind of stir that all around. Once it's all stirred, I begin to add the flour. I begin by adding the whole wheat flour, and I stir that until it gets nicely mixed in. And at some point it gets so thick that I have to start using my hands. And then I begin adding the white flour. And I add about a cup at a time or so. And I just keep mixing that in. Then I take a little bit more of the flour and I put it on the counter, and I take it out of the bowl at this point, so that I can knead it on the counter. It's a little bit easier. And as you can see, the dough is really sticky, so you're just going to keep kneading. It takes a little while to get all this kneaded in if you're doing it by hand. In total, I probably spent somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes doing all the kneading and mixing all the flour in. But as you can see, the dough is still sticky, so I continue to put more dough out on the counter and continue to knead that and get that all mixed in. In all, I used the full 2 1/2 cups of white flour, 2 1/2 cups of wheat flour, and when I had all the flour mixed in, it was still just a little bit sticky, but I really didn't want to add any more flour. I felt like it had enough, so at that point, I just put a little oil on my hands and used that to continue kneading. Once I had kneaded for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and everything was mixed in, I put it in a bowl that was coated with oil and covered it with plastic wrap and set that aside to rise. I let it rise for about 45 minutes to an hour. Once my time was up, I removed the plastic and kind of punched it down to get all the air bubbles out, and did a little bit more kneading. Brought it out on the countertop and worked to get it very well kneaded and all the air bubbles out. At that point, it was time to cut the dough in half, and I just kind of eyeball it using my dough cutter. You could also use a knife or a pair of scissors or something like that, but this dough cutter works quite nicely for that. So the first one, I just set that aside. We're going to turn that into a loaf of bread, but this one that I'm working with right now is going to become my cinnamon rolls. So right now what I do is just kind of work to turn this into a large rectangle. I don't really have measurements. I just try to get the dough fairly thin and get the rectangle as much to a rectangle shape as I possibly can. You just kind of have to mess with the dough as you're rolling to get your shape, and it doesn't have to be perfect. At that point, I put some butter down on it. Now, I don't have measurements for this. I just kind of eye it. So it's really up to you. You can do as much or as little as you want. Once I've spread the butter, then it's time to sprinkle on the brown sugar. Again, it's up to your discretion how much you want, how much or how little you want. And then cinnamon. Same thing. I just kind of sprinkle it generously all across the top. Now it's time to roll it up. And I just kind of work it out. To begin with, it's, you know, a little bit more trying to make sure I'm moving evenly. And but once I have it going, I just kind of roll it all up. Once I have it rolled up, then I kind of pull the ends and pinch it to the side of the dough to hold it in place. I get a 9x13 pan out and I spray it with some nonstick spray. I use scissors to cut my cinnamon rolls. There's lots of ways people do it, but this is what I found works the best. I kind of start by cutting it in half, and then I cut each half in half, and then I continue doing that until everything is about evenly cut. Sometimes doing it with the scissors, you don't quite get the very bottom of it, so I kind of snip it as I take each piece off, and I lay it out, spread them out as evenly as possible in my 9x13 pan. And I set that aside now, cover it, and let it rise for about 20 to 30 minutes until it's doubled in size. Now I take the other loaf and I just kind of cover it, and I'm going to set that to side so it can keep rising. While the cinnamon rolls are rising, I make the frosting. I like to put my frosting on just as soon as my cinnamon rolls come out, because the frosting kind of melts and it goes on the inside and makes them very gooey and delicious. And this is just a basic cream cheese butter frosting with powdered sugar, vanilla. And that's kind of the consistency there that I'm trying to show you that I go for. Not too thick, but not too thin either. At that point, the bread dough needed to be punched down again. So it actually gets 2 rises. Because you have the other stuff going on, and so you kind of have to let that rise a second time, which doesn't hurt the bread at all. I sprayed a bread pan with some nonstick spray, and at this point I just kind of roll it and try to shape it into somewhat of a log looking type shape. And once I'm satisfied with that, I put it into my pan. I'm going to cover that and let it rise for probably another half hour. At this point, the cinnamon rolls were done and the bread had risen, and I stuck that in the oven and I frosted the cinnamon rolls. Like I said, I try to do it as soon as I can once it comes out of the oven. So I just kind of spread my frosting, and again, you can use as little or as much as you want of the frosting that you made. You could even leave them unfrosted if you would rather, but I think they're the best with that way. After 30 minutes of cooking, the bread had finished, and it was really delicious. So the next day, what I usually do, or after it's cooled, is I slice the bread and freeze it already sliced. 1 loaf of homemade bread is just too much bread for my husband and I to go through before it would start to go bad. So I found that the best way to keep it is just to put it into the freezer, and then I can just pull out a slice or two for our breakfast or a sandwich or something like that, and we get to enjoy it for a whole lot longer. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope if you liked what you saw that you'll give it a try, and if you do, come back and tell me what you think. Alright, and don't forget to give it a like, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel, would you please consider subscribing? That means a lot to me. Okay guys, I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.